is Gabe Zolna. You know, what's really amazing is you've got all these people now screaming about gun control. And it's usually the members of Congress, they're going to sit down and try to figure out how they can take away our Second Amendment rights from us. You know, what's really insane is if you take a look at it, and you can verify this, it's all there on the web. There's a number of states, and mainly the Democratic states, that try to control their citizens by preventing them from being able to protect themselves, by not allowing them to arm themselves. And the District of Columbia, they have the absolute most stringent gun laws in the nation. As a matter of fact, you can't even have a gun in components, all totally disassembled. That's a crime in the District of Columbia. Yet they also are recognized as having the highest rate of murder and gun-related murders as well. You take a look at a state like Michigan, you take a look at a state like Illinois, you take a look at California, and even Connecticut. They all have very strict gun rules. Yet they all also have something in common. They have the highest gun-related crimes. Now, how is that possible? It's pretty much impossible to get a concealed carry permit in any one of those states. And yet, they have the highest rate of gun crimes. And I think I've said this before. As a matter of fact, I know I've said this before. What really should happen is the state, California, for example, in 2010, they had about 980 gun-related murders. What they should try to do, and they can do because they have the information, is determine as to what kind of guns kill those people. I'm not referring to the caliber, I'm referring to whether or not those guns were legally owned by law-abiding citizens. And I think you'll find that the majority of gun-related murders occur with weapons that are not, in fact, registered. In other words, law-abiding citizens tend not to go out and kill people at the same rate as citizens that don't obey the law and obviously don't bother registering guns, because in most cases they're probably not even eligible to obtain a gun. You know, it's really totally worthless is they're trying to restrict the size of magazines. Now, this is a magazine, okay? This is from a 45 6-hour, it'll hold 8 rounds. But see, here's the problem. To release it, you press a button, it's gone, you put a new one in, and you're done. So you see, now you have 16 rounds. And if I had more of these magazines, each one again holds 8 rounds. So it's just a matter of pressing a button, dropping a magazine, putting another magazine in. That's if that's what you want to do. Now, obviously, the size of the magazine doesn't make any difference. In other words, if it holds 8 or if it holds 15. But it's the way these people that are in control of our government within various states try to exert their powers. You can't have more than 10 rounds in California. You can't have more than 8 rounds in some other states. You can't have any rounds in most other democratically controlled states that are run by Democratic governors. I don't know, maybe there's a mental illness for Democrats that have an aversion towards guns. But every one of those states' senators and every one of those states' congressmen, they're protected. Huh? I mean, Harry Reid gets driven around wherever he goes, and people follow him, and they're armed. Now, is his life worth any more than mine or yours? I don't think so. You know, states should not be able to dictate the way they dictate. It doesn't make any sense that a crime committed in one state has a different punishment than a crime committed in another state. The exact same crime should have the same punishment, but that's not how it works. Every state has its own laws, and the laws are applicable to that state are different than laws applicable to other states. In New Orleans, you have to study Louisiana Napoleonic law to be a lawyer. I mean, that's totally insane. But anyway, that's a different topic. What has to happen is that the government has to realize a couple of realities. They can't control drugs. Our borders are riddled. Billions of dollars transfer from the United States to Mexico, to Cuba, to wherever else they're going, to those drug-related countries. And we can't stop that. Nor can you stop who has guns. And all you can do is take away guns from law-abiding citizens. Another example is England. In 1997, every citizen had to take their guns and give them to the government. Well, when they did that, they said, well, we're going to control crime. Well, guess what? Crime went up 87%. 87%. And who gets hurt? The law-abiding citizens that don't have access to guns, they can't protect themselves. They tried that in New Zealand. They tried that in Australia. And the exact same thing happens. So why is it that the people in power don't understand that? Why is it that they can all have 724 protection and we can't? And why is it that they limit us from being able to protect ourselves depending on the state that you live in? It makes no sense. I agree people shouldn't be allowed to have automatic weapons. I'm talking fully automatic weapons. But guess what? The bad guys do have them. All right? I don't think too many citizens have them. And those that do have to go through stringent background checks. And, you know, I'm pretty certain in certain states like Arizona, you can actually acquire fully automatic weapons. But the hurdles you have to go through, in most cases, most people don't bother. So, what's the answer? Well, I think one of the big problems we have in this country is the way our government, led by the Obama and his dysfunctional administration, are turning people away from God. What happened in Connecticut is an isolated case. The man was obviously mentally disturbed, and you can't control that, nor can you protect against it. Now, if they had a gun in this school, and the principal or someone there was trained in firearms, they probably could have reduced the number of fatalities. And if you notice, these bad guys, where do they usually go? They go to gun-free zones, all right? That theater in Colorado, big signs outside, no weapons allowed. Colorado, you can carry. It's a carry state. But they had a big sign, no guns allowed. So that's where that idiot went. The chances of him getting shot by somebody else were negligible. Pretty slim. Same thing with schools. Schools are gun-free zones. That's where these sickos tend to gravitate towards. You're not going to see them going to a shooting range. That's not what they're going to do, all right? They're going to avoid shooting ranges. So, what do we have to do? We have to bring common sense back into play. People should be allowed to carry weapons once they're trained and qualified. I don't agree with what Arizona did, where anybody can carry concealed without having any kind of training. I think that's wrong. You can't get a driver's license unless you can prove you can drive. You can't get a pilot's license unless you can prove you can fly. You can't get a motorcycle's license unless you can prove you can ride. So why do you allow someone to have a weapon without proper training? But that's a different story. I think that people should be able to be trained. People should be able to appreciate what a weapon can do, and people should be able to protect themselves and their families. And it's none of the government's business, okay? I hate to say it, Governor Brown. It's none of the governor's businesses as what their citizens should be allowed to or should not be allowed to when it comes to protecting themselves and their families. And you know, all that Obama's done with this gun craziness in the last 2 weeks, he's driven gun sales right off the wall. There are no guns on the walls anymore. You can't find a high-powered rifle anywhere. Anywhere. Magazines for those ARs, this is just for a .45, but high-capacity magazines, they've tripled, quadrupled in price. So, Obama should get an award for having sold the most guns of any president in history. In history. I wouldn't be surprised if more guns were sold in the last 4 years than that were sold in the previous 24 years. There's a reason they're buying guns. People want to protect themselves and they think that the government's going to jump down their throats and take away their gun rights. So, what do we need to do? Have sensible laws, make certain that people do understand how to use them, and do background checks. Felons shouldn't be allowed to have guns, but guess what? They do. And that's the problem. You can't control the flow of guns, nor more than you can control the flow of drugs. So, do the best that you can and understand your limitations.